Okay. So first I'm going to list a couple of names that a lot of us should be familiar with if you took history class. So Winston Churchill, George Washington, and Barack Obama. Here's another list of people that you maybe not be familiar with unless you took maybe a world history class. And I have Mao Zedong, Deng Xiaoping, and Sun Yat-sen. Now, if we could throw away all that historical information that we just learned, there's still a main difference, and that's their names. So, if we were to refer to George Washington, we always refer to him as President Washington, General Washington, well, whatever form of address you have. However, if we refer to someone like Mao Zedong, we would refer to him as Chairman Mao instead of Chairman Zedong. So, why is there a difference? And the main difference is because of the Eastern versus Western culture and naming system. Now, I'm not going to do a whole comparison as not as a speech because we'll be here for like, 2 hours. So instead, today I will be explaining the Chinese naming system and the cultural importance and historical importance it has. So here's a Chinese name I just made up, Zhou Xinhuang. So the last name of the family would always go first. So if my father's name was like, some other name, I guess besides this, you always share the name Zhou before any other name you have. And then you'll have a given name given to the son or daughter, and it would be Xinhuang. However, the difference between these two names is that the last name is always one syllable, and then the name you're given has 2 syllables, and it's usually a combination of also one syllable word names and then combined together. So then you have a unique name in a way because you're having a combination of 3 different names. You can always refer to them as this, written and saying and Z, or you could have a dash in between the 2 combination names, which would be Xie, Zhi, and Huang. Another interesting thing is that when you have this type of name, the formal address such as professor or chairman, it always goes after it. And this is usually in traditional Chinese address. So if I were to say to a Professor Kirkman, it would be Kirkman Professor in Chinese, I guess. I don't know that much, but yeah. So why do we call Chairman Mao as it is today? Mainly because of the westernization of a lot of the world. So for this, I have 2 personal examples, and then two of my friends back in high school. One of them is Korean, but they have the same not Chinese naming system, but a similar naming system where they have the 2 syllables for the first name and 1 syllable for the last name. And his name was Zhongzheng Li. However, of course, if we were to say it correctly, it would be Li Zhongzheng. However, in school, we always refer to him as Jason, obviously, because whenever the professor teacher says his name, always a lot of mispronunciation or like weird name and all that. So we give him the name Jason, but however, if we were to be with his family and be with his, I guess, culture, he would be referred as Zhongzheng. However, I have another friend that was literally the whitest Asian guy I've ever met. He had, first name was Matthew. He had the last name of the most common last name ever, Zhang. So we always refer to him as Zhang, or would never like saying Zhang or Matthew, even in his house with his family. So that's a lot of impact of the westernization of even the naming system. So why it's so important to be able to maintain this, and because the Chinese naming system has such a cultural and historical value among the Chinese people. So according to George Leonard, who wrote the Chinese and Other Naming Systems article, the Chinese naming system is most associated with the Han Chinese people, which is the dominant Chinese ethnicity in China. And then according to Wan Kun, Xinhuan used, the percentage of Han Chinese in China is 91.51%, which is roughly 1.270 billion people out of the 1.388 billion in 2010, which I'm assuming has grown since today, which is very I guess such a mono ethnicity in China. So that I guess gives an excuse for that, but with such diversity, you have to get a lot of room for that. For like different naming systems of like Hispanics and Germans, I guess. And then the importance of this to the Han Chinese people is because it has been around for according to Zhu Hongmei, 4,000 years since the, I guess, either first immigration or the first settlement of the people of China. And these were, of course, the Han Chinese people. And according to Zhu Hongbang also, the legend is that the first Chinese dynasty was in 2852 BC. And then the first recorded use of the Chinese naming system in the Chinese dynasty would be the Shang dynasty in 1600 BC. So between that, I guess that legendary time where it kind of was created and the historical accurate usage, it was still roughly around 3,000 years since it had been created. So to conclude all this, the Chinese naming system is a very unique and a model for a lot of the Eastern naming systems. So therefore, it's definitely a naming system that should be kept even among people that have moved to the U.S. and should be, of course, valued by the people.
All right, well, you effectively identified what your purpose was. I thought that you had some good examples with the name list that you were giving at the beginning. You've got a clear statement of the goal. The explanation of the naming system is fine. I like the historical references. I do think that there's some cultural stuff that doesn't get discussed on that particular point, but I guess that wasn't really going to be the focus of the speech, although at the end it really sounds like it should have been a bigger part of what's going on there, because there are issues of hierarchy and familial status and identification that ought to be part of that process, and you don't really touch on those sorts of things. The content issues aside, like I said, I thought the content was pretty reasonable. The visual presentation has some strengths and a couple of weaknesses. I think you've got some good gestures while you're speaking. Your facial expressions are usually somewhat animated. I thought you integrated the visual materials into the speech pretty well. I do think you have a tendency to talk to this side of the room. Maybe that's because that's where you sit most of the time. And so the orientation of your body is usually in this direction. Once in a while you look at those folks, but typically it's over your shoulder as opposed to turning to integrate yourself with them. And you do the same thing that a lot of people do. The longer the speech went on, the further back you got, and then you end up in that slot between the demo station and the screen, as if there's some harmful. It's like, am I radioactive? I'm sitting here, and the closer you get to me, that you're going to get burned or something like that. I won't give you a hard time about pronunciation, although I should, because look, I would have trouble with the pronunciation of a variety of names. You mentioned all of your friends before, and they go by Jason or Matt or something like that instead of the name that they usually use. So I'm not going to scream about it too much, but I'm a ham, not a man. So it's Kirk Ham as opposed to Kirkman. Kirkman is somebody else. I don't know who they are, but they're not me. Since we're doing the name thing, and that is your topic. Your voice, I think, projects well. I think that's one of the things that you have an advantage of. I think your voice does project out well. It always sounds animated when you're speaking. Once in a while, there are a couple of awkward pacing issues, but those are usually infrequent, and that's mostly transition stuff. All right, thank you. Well, that brings us to the end of the prepared speeches.